take this topic by the horns.
No, didn't like it. Didn't like
that's
it. That felt
that's all
like a
right. You have
stretch.
bad taste. We know you have bad taste. It's okay. All right, we are going to transition into a topic that has always been kind of on the forefront of our conversations, but has been more so on the front of the last couple of weeks. And that's the disrespect of the league through its Next Pro affiliates. So, two different topics we're going to cover. First one is FCC's rebranding of their FCC2 to Commonwealth United. And the other one is the idea of the MLS Next Pro sides not performing well in the US Open Cup. I may butcher this name, and I'm going to apologize in advance, but Kartik Krishnaiyer. But he's a senior writer at World Soccer Talk, and he is as anti-MLS as one can get. And he goes on as FCC announced that Commonwealth United is going to be the new name of their Next Pro side as other teams begin their rebrand and start to take this path. We've covered that in another episode, right? And he goes on and says, by the way, this isn't going to be the only one. Was planning on doing a notebook feature for BT90. I guess that's a different thing that he writes for. In the near future about potential rebrands of MLS Next Pro clubs. They're coming. This one is particularly audacious as USL already has two professional sides in Kentucky. And this is the whole thing. And I'm going to try and not go down too many rabbit holes here, but this is why anybody who has like a bit of reading comprehension doesn't enjoy being on Twitter for these conversations, because the tweets are worded so specifically so that people who don't want to read or do any research on it just instantly buy into it, right? Already has two professional clubs in Kentucky. Yes, they do. Lexington FC and Louisville City, right? Never once do they mention who the two teams are, where they're located, what divisions they're in. And then they go ahead and say that this team is trying to kill them off without mentioning the fact that FCC2, which has been around a couple of years after FCC's entrance into the league, has been playing at the same exact place that this Commonwealth United is going to be playing for the last like 4 years. They, first of all, shifting from MLS because people aren't buying into your MLS anti-MLS takes down to the Next Pro team because that's the new hot thing is lazy. It's a lazy take, right? And then people are like, oh yeah, World Soccer Talk doesn't have an anti-MLS buy it. Shut up. We need to, I'm going to emphasize this really, really importantly, right? This whole section is not going to be us trying to give MLS pass on some of its past decisions, claim that it's perfect and doesn't need to be changed, right? We are not doing any of that. But if you're going to try and take a shot at a league or its affiliate or whatever it may be, do some research and have some merit behind it, right? The same people who claim that they want to see the game grow in this country are finding any way possible to discredit the league that is working the hardest, or at least as hard as everybody else, to improve it at the top. And now we're focusing on bringing soccer to more areas in the country that don't have teams. And the people who are relatively well known in American soccer as personalities are using it to take shots at the league and get clicks on social media and a little bit of clout, which is a damn shame. Lexington and Louisville, D2 and D3 sides respectively, are 80 and 100 miles away from where FCC2 is going to be playing, or soon to be Commonwealth United, will be playing their games in Northern Kentucky University. 100 miles. How in the world do we see that as intentionally trying to take over pro soccer in Kentucky? It's ridiculous. I'll take a break here and have a breath and I'll let you go at it. But I mean, like, unbelievable. Sorry, go ahead.
So I've got a couple thoughts on this as well. First of all, as you mentioned before, these aren't necessarily like just new teams from MLS Next Pro that are just popping up out of the blue. Like they've been around. A lot of them have been in these locations or very close to it. And yet, despite all of that, USL Championship had 75% of their teams have a year-over-year increase in attendance in 2023. So I don't understand how all of a sudden, because they're rebranding, they're murdering USL and they're never going to survive. And MLS just wants to be the only league in America and all that mumbo jumbo. On top of that, if it were the case that a bunch of teenagers, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, are putting your club out of business, I think there are much bigger problems at hand than these MLS Next Pro teams potentially ruining your attendance and ruining your club. I think there are, if that is the case, there are many other issues at play. It is not just the fact that some teenagers are playing soccer near you now. So there are a lot of things to look at here, and none of them are being looked at with this tweet. I think it sounds like it's just trying to garner outrage towards anything MLS related, and I think it is missing the mark.
And again, this is why I laugh when they're like, "Oh yeah, they don't have an anti-MLS bias," and then they do stuff like this, right? Because it's exactly what it is. It's for clicks. They know exactly what they're doing, and they say, "Oh, look, an MLS Next Pro team is trying to be an independent team, and it's in Kentucky, which means they're trying to take over all of Kentucky." When you know damn well that's not the case, but they know that there's a Twitter hive out there that's like anything that MLS does has to be terrible, so we're going to jump on it and give you clicks, right? And that's a huge problem. But I agree. Reiterating the point that we made 3 episodes ago, right? If MLS is rebranding their third division development league side with teenagers and like a few over 23s, it is capable of bankrupting one of the most successful teams in USL Championship in the last half decade at least, maybe longer, who has their own soccer specific stadium, that has a women's team, a youth development program, has put players into Europe, right? We've got players coming out of Louisville, Josh Widener, who's in Europe right now. If Commonwealth United, who's been there 5 years, just changes their name and suddenly bankrupts you, we've got other problems to talk about. And it's not the fact that we've changed the name of a team, right? By the way, doing it 100 miles away. That's the other big part of this, right? I can't think of a single person who's like, oh yeah, 100 miles, it's probably like an hour and a half drive. I can make that trip if I'm doing it, especially on a weekday. Like I could probably make that trip, or I could stay here and watch from home. And I could also just watch a development team for the pro. Oh wait, no, I'm only 5 miles outside of Cincinnati itself. I'm just going to go that way. Like, where is the logic there? Like, I'm going to drive 100 miles, an hour and a half down to watch USL Championship, or I'm going to drive 15 miles up and watch an MLS side that's doing relatively well right now. Why do they think that just having it in that area is going to kill it? I don't know, right? But I am getting tired of this broad paintbrush of generalities being used to paint everything MLS does as bad. Just because somebody online who pays for Twitter says it's bad. Like, we're really out here using a platform that this guy has, Kartik, with between him and his World Soccer Talk. I don't know if it's his company or if he's just a big writer. I know he's a writer. I don't know if he like started or whatever. Combined, they're almost at 100,000 followers. And they're like, oh yeah, we're here to grow the game, right? We want to make everything better. We want to grow the lower leagues and whatever. And they're just out here doing zero research, tweeting and writing articles for clicks that pushes the narrative that soccer isn't legit in America because it's not done in a certain way, or people are doing it the wrong way, right? And maybe in your mind, you're like, oh, this is good. If I don't like soccer, if I don't like MLS, people are going to watch USL and USL is going to grow and it's going to be the big thing. No. People are going to stop watching MLS. 5% of them are going to go to USL. The rest of them, Premier League. And guess what? Those people are then going to become the next group of, well, it's not the Premier League, so why am I watching it, right? That doesn't grow the game. It doesn't. And I'm scrolling through these tweets of anti-MLS accounts that are pushing USL like super hard these days. Like, everybody needs to watch USL. It's on CBS. It's on Golazo. It's on this, on that. And it just reminds me of like MLS 2.5, right? MLS is getting a little bit of traction. We've got some good players. We've got a TV deal. And it's ours. Like, it's our thing, right? And everybody in that time was trying to convince their friends, like, hey, watch MLS a little bit. It's a good time. It's not the Premier League, but it's fun. Every tweet that I'm seeing now is, yeah, USL isn't that good, but it's ours. Like, we should watch it. It's getting so much better, this, that, and the other. They're just 20 years behind the curve. They just want to go back and be like, oh, yeah, look, we found this niche thing called USL and we were here first. And we want to make it cool by saying that thing's not cool, but our thing's cool. And you should all come on our side. That's all it is people just trying to be like, the first people to do something. And I'm not out here being like, oh, USL needs to die, because I think it's really like there are some really fun games. There are really good teams in there. Nisa was the same way. I enjoyed watching Nisa when I could, but to enjoy one thing at the expense of another and trying to take down another is really silly, in my opinion. Like I'm one of those people who can watch anything all the time. If it's soccer, I enjoy it. I don't understand the whole, oh man, we can't like MLS if we're gonna like USL, or we can't like USL if we're gonna like MLS. Like, it's football. Enjoy it. Watch it all. Pick 7 different teams and follow them. I don't care. But they're like, being a relatively well followed account and using it to drag down what is, I don't even think it's arguably anymore, the most successful American soccer league in history, and using your platform to tear it down instead of bring everybody else up is a really bad reason to be where you're at. Like, it just, again, I can go down a whole bunch of this, and it would end just being word vomit, because it's going to be the same thing repeated over and over again. I just think they do it all for the wrong reason, and it has zero research behind it. It's all for clicks, and I hate that, because clickbaiting things doesn't improve things. It only brings things.
Yeah, I don't see how the goal is to bring up soccer in the country when the only thing you're suggesting is that we tear down one of the leagues there. How does that build up soccer in the country? How is that benefiting or improving soccer in the country at all? Like, sure, like you said, maybe it helps USL like 1 or 2%, but in the grand scheme of things, soccer in this country goes down drastically. Like, it probably kills soccer in this country, to be honest with you. Probably just kills it permanently. And the, like you said, the Premier League is now just like the full, like the only focus here. Like, even if they don't go to the Premier League, they're going to be like, all right, whatever. I'm going to go watch basketball. I'm going to watch football. I'm going to go watch baseball. I'm going to go watch hockey. Like, there's a million other things that they can go do. Uh, so yeah, I don't think they're just taking down MLS is not moving the needle towards improving soccer in this country at all.
No.
And this the whole conversation, and I don't want to dive down into it, but I think the whole conversation is about it's heading right in the direction of pro rel. It's the same thing every single time. Whenever someone's talking about wanting to improve USL and MLS is trying to kill USL, it's all related to the pro rel because they want USL to be stronger so that they can build the pyramid because that's what Europe does, and Europe is successful, and pro rel is the only way that we could be successful in this country because all of a sudden millions of people are just going to jump on board as soon as MLS gets pro rel.
Yeah, and I didn't even take this down a pro rel thing, because that's a whole nother argument, right? But it's almost like they don't want to see it succeed unless they were the first ones to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, they would rather go back 20 years, go back to MLS 2.0 days, where um go back to okay stadiums, okay players, not so much money in the game, just so that they can say, oh yeah, I was here when, and then see it grow up to this whole thing, instead of actually just improving it and bring it all together up, right? Because, like you mentioned, if you tear MLS down, the only thing that's happened is we're going back 20 years and we're restarting, which some people have outwardly come out and been like, yeah, that's what I want to do,
Which is insane.
which is mental, mental. And again, just to wrap this one section up, this is not us defending MLS to the bone, right? Like, they have done tons of not great things. We've covered them already. We've talked about them already. You can go back and watch some other things. They've done not great stuff for monetary reasons, for personal reasons, whatever. But to come out and be like, oh, they're trying to kill everything in USL because they're putting MLS Next Pro teams 100 miles away with a new name, is lazy. It's lazy and it's tired. It's a lazy and tired take. You can probably put together an argument about some of their actions hurting USL. Is it intentionally to kill them? No. And we've had that conversation already. You can go watch that too. But this specific take is lazy and really, really tired. And to continue on this theme of relatively not so great takes, We turn to Sebastian Salazar in the Football Americas podcast, but he comes out and had a 40-second clip on MLS Next Pro teams bowing out of the US Open Cup to a bunch of amateur sides. And he used it as a statement against MLS and its US Open Cup stance. And to me, this one's a little bit different. So much like the Garber comments in the past, where we broken down kind of what he said and what we think he meant, that's kind of what I've gone to do here. So first and foremost, it's a 40-second clip. Sebastian Salazar is essentially becoming the anti-MLS version of Alexi Lalas, right? He's going out there and he's saying anything he wants against MLS that he knows that will get the anti-MLS Twitter hive buzzing around and engaging and all this stuff just to get clicks, right? And he goes on this mini rant after 8 of the 11 MLS Next Pro sides were bounced out of the competition, and he says 4 at the hands of amateur sides. His first reference is to Garber's comment about MLS Next Pro being the only place kids can play soccer, and if it didn't exist, nobody would be playing soccer. We've addressed this comment before. We did it on that exact comment, that exact statement. We went through the whole thing and broke it down. His comment, taken out of context in this scenario and in the scenario before, was about the uber 1%, or the 0.001% who could either play at the top level in America, Europe, or other sports in general, because USL was never really an option for them, right? Is it the correct comment to make? No. And I think we know that as soccer grows, all levels are going to be viable, because USL is starting to put teams in or players in Europe. And it seems like those are going to be the two pathways, and that's fine. And that's going to change. And I think the comment by Garber there was wrong, totally fine. But here's where I have the problem. He follows that up by saying, maybe they really shouldn't be playing at all. If you're a person whose entire platform over the last 5 months has been about America growing the game, America needs pro rel so that people can engage with it and we can make the stronger from the ground up, right? And MLS needs to be in US Open Cup because that's what it's all about. It makes the game better. It makes it all across the country. Everybody wants to be engaged in the US Open Cup. And then you come back because a bunch of kids from MLS Next Pro lost to adults in an Open Cup game who were just physically stronger than them, who weren't playing the best football, while MLS Next Pro is about development and teaching them how to play a certain style. And your suggestion, because they've lost to 4 amateur adult teams, is quit altogether? Are we kidding? Like, how is that going to grow the game if we take people who are playing in some of the top developmental academies in the world or in the country and just saying, yeah, quit because you lost to a bunch of amateurs who are 9 years older than you? Now, what I think he meant to say, and I'm going to ask you about this in a second, is that they shouldn't be playing in the US Open Cup, which is a completely different conversation and maybe a fair point. But with his phrasing and the specific clipping of this section was something that he knew would stir engagement and get impressions on Twitter. This is one of the reasons why I think that football is going to be held back in this country, because people are more concerned about having a big following with people who will take dumps on the league and all the things that are bad, instead of actually addressing issues and commenting on it. I have a point to that, but I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's the low hanging fruit of MLS Twitter, is just to jump on board and say all these bad things about MLS because it's just really easy. Like you said, if you start doing that, you're going to be surrounded by the crowd of people that agree with you. And because it's not a big crowd, they will gather up together and support each other. And it's easy to get engagement in that regard. But I think the real way to go about these things is to have like proper criticism about things like you said before, like the league is far from perfect. We've talked a number of times about all the things they've done wrong with US Open Cup and the way they've handled that. And I think that's the proper way to go about it, is to not say like we should just completely abolish, like the league should not be involved at all. All this stuff, bad things about MLS, and get rid of the league entirely and all this stuff. But I think the real conversation needs to be had about like where things went wrong, how things can be improved, not necessarily just burn it all to the ground immediately.
And this clip really, the more I dug into it, the more I got frustrated with it, right? So he finishes the little clip by referencing US Open Cup. Finally, it took him 30 seconds to talk about US Open Cup, which is the premise of what he was talking about, saying that MLS Next Pro teams losing is definitely what the cup needed. And you could tell the tone in his voice was sarcastic and condescending. And this is where I lose a lot of respect for the clip, right? So all year long, since the decision of MLS to pull out of the US Open Cup, we've been hearing that US Open Cup is special because it's different from any other thing we have outside of maybe March Madness, as we're in, the last stages of March Madness right now. It gives lower league soccer teams the ability, and players the ability, to play against teams in great, leagues above them, and pull up upsets, and MLS pulling away takes away all of that and it ruins it. And then they put their next pro sides in, and that is just the worst thing in the world, which is not great, right? We've talked about why that's not great. But now we've got amateur teams that are just part-time players. They show up, they play games, maybe they have a training session once a week. One of them's named after a burrito place, dude. Like, a California burrito place put a team together in an amateur division, won whatever the I think it was in California, whatever the California qualifying was, and now have taken down an MLS Next Pro side and a USL League One side. Both of them professionals in their own way. And instead of being excited about that and raising them up and, oh my God, look at this team that's making all of these great runs, we're using it as a way to dunk on teenagers who are playing their first real competitive game. And this is why I got upset, because I thought maybe this was just a clip of him ending it. And in the beginning of the episode, he was like, oh man, like this team, Farolito from California, going on this great run. Here's what they did. You want to know what the clip was posted on April 4th. So I thought it was either a preview, kind of like we do for our episodes, or a post clip like we do for our episodes. So I went back and I looked at the episodes that they were talking about. The episode before this clip was posted, the topics were Tyler Adams' man of the match performance at Bournemouth, which was a fraud because he should have given Everton a penalty, but we won't go down that road. The week past of NWSL and the Canadian Premier League. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's a preview. I look at the episode after. They clickbaited Messi-less Miami losing to the Champions Cup, Messi's post-match scuffle with Monterrey, MLS's poor performance in Champions Cup, U.S. Women's National Team She Believes Cup, and the Copa del Rey final. 8 different topics, not a single one about U.S. Open Cup, which means that at the very end of, because he says it in the clip, I want to leave you with this note. So at the very end of whatever episode this came from, he decided to just go completely off script and take a dunk on the MLS Next Pro setup, because he knew that it was going to give him clicks and he knew he was going to get engagement. And again, nothing to do with anything they were talking about, which is, again, weird. But it's just so disappointing that when people who have this sort of following will worry more about getting clicks for their show than actually engaging in that issue, right? And I get it. It's their job. But when your whole platform is about improving the game and making US Open Cup what it's supposed to be and whatever, and the only thing you're doing is a 40-second clip to dunk on the MLS Next Pro group that lost, thinking, again, going back and thinking, oh, if enough people don't like MLS, then they're going to go watch USL and we're going to make it all better. As we mentioned, no. You know that that's not going to happen, because otherwise they'd be there already. USL is in all the smaller markets that people say, oh, MLS could have gone to smaller markets and instead they only went to the big ones, right? Fair. There are some of them, like Louisville, for example, who have a great following and would have been great in MLS. That's not the case all over the country. It's a very small percentage of the small areas that do well, right? MLS has so much wrong with it. MLS Next Pro has so much wrong with it. You want to be upset with MLS not playing in the US Open Cup? Fine. Fair game. We've mentioned that already. You want to be upset with MLS Next Pro having D3 sanctioning and playing in the US Open Cup? You can make that case too, right? I don't know if the Premier, for example, the Premier League second division, I don't know if they've got sanctioning. I think they're on their own little, one-off, right? I think in Germany and Spain, you have some of the second teams playing in the pyramid, but they can't get up to the first division or the second division just by ruling of the league, right? You can complain about that all you want. No problems whatsoever, right? But if your only thing is going to use a 40-second clip to dunk on the performance of teenagers against adults, instead of giving praise to those amateurs that just got an upset. By the way, in that clip, if you listen very closely, of the 4 amateur teams that got those upsets, not a single team had their name mentioned. Not a single player was like, oh, look at the way this guy stood out and should be getting looks from USL 1 sides or whatever. Never. Which tells you what the intention of the clip was, which was disappointing. And again, now I look back at it, I feel kind of bad. We're giving him the engagement he wanted, right? Which, whatever. But these are the reason the game is going to get held back in the country, not because MLS does it one way and USL does it the same way, but with a little bit less money into it. It's the fact that people are too busy trying to tear down everything, right? The soccer wars, as we reference it, they're too busy trying to tear each other down. And again, MLS probably does a little bit more on USL too than we like to admit, whatever. But if the people who are having these sorts of conversations, instead of talking about the actual issues, are just doing it for engagement, which the last two examples I believe show that, this is not how we grow the game. It's how we drag it backwards. And it will take us exponentially longer to get to a point where we'd like to be. It's just disappointing, really, to me, that this is the way that they're going about it.
That's quite the rant you had there.
Sorry, I got excited.
I I could tell.
I
No,
didn't get excited. I got disappointed. When I get disappointed, I get defensive.
I could see that. I wanted to talk about another competition that goes on in because there was a point in that statement that you were talking about where it's MLS Next Pro sides are playing like garbage and getting beat by USL sides and amateur sides. And my point here with this is that this shouldn't necessarily be surprising. And the example I want to use is the EFL trophy in everybody's favorite league, England. The EFL trophy is for League One and League Two, but included in that are academy sides. Not all the Premier League, but there are a number of Premier League U21 sides that are involved in this competition. Looking at the 2023-2024 EFL trophy, it's a little bit different than US Open Cup because they do group stages before they get to the knockouts. In the group stages, there is a U21 side in all of the groups. There's one side in every single group. 6 out of the 16 U21 sides were able to get out of the group, or basically first or second in the group. Only one team finished top of their group, so 5 out of the 6 that made it through were second place, and the other 10 got eliminated. Within the next round, only 2 teams, which is the round of 32, only 2 U21 sides made it past the round of 32. So I don't understand why it's so shocking or surprising that an MLS Next Pro side is struggling against teams that are basically like our third and fourth tier in the US. Like if you really want to put it into a pyramid, USL 1, USL 2, third and fourth tier. Like there, of course, there are upsets in there as well. Like the semi-professional teams are obviously going to be at a lower level than like League 1 or League 2 in England, right? Like upsets will happen. It's a bunch of teenagers playing. It's going to happen. But majority of the time, it's like USL. Like if these MLS Next Pro teams are losing to third, fourth tier sides in the US, then it's like, why is this so surprising when the exact same thing is happening in England? You know, past the round of 30, like majority of the time, these teams are not winning. And even the few teams that made it to the round of 32, a few of them got absolutely blown out, like 4-0, 3-0 losses in their knockout games there. I think even out of the 2 that moved on, only 1 made it to the quarterfinals, and then that was it. They were all out beyond that point. So like, it shouldn't have been this expectation that MLS Next Pro was just going to come in here because they have the MLS tag. They were just going to wipe the floor with everybody. Like it's a bunch of 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids playing against people who are like in their 30s. It's going to be there's going to be plenty of cases where they're going to lose. So I don't think that that's like a fair criticism of the MLS Next Pro sides to be like they should have done better. Like why are they losing to these teams? Like it's a bad look for MLS. Like I don't think there was, if you were having higher expectations than that, then you had too high of expectations.
Well, and I wasn't actually going to bring this in, but since you went numbers, I've got numbers. I went back and I looked at the last 4 US Open Cup first and second rounds. MLS, and again, it was a manual thing because it was all on Wikipedia, so it was a little tough to do it. I was kind of counting as I was going. MLS Next Pro has been upset 5 times in this thing, right? They're the 3rd division, which means they're only playing teams below them, which means when they lose, they're getting upset, right? Let's back up 2 years where USL Championship was playing in 2022. The 25 teams that they had, 8 of them were upset. 3 of them by MLS Next Pro or NISA, which were in their first and second year of existence, and some of them had been like the clubs were their first year of existence because NISA was still kind of fluctuating in that realm, right? Um, the rest were USL one sides, which again, pro, whatever. I'm not going to take a shot at that, but if you look at the upset rate between a percentage of the 2022 upset and the 2024 upsets, 32% of USL championship sides were upset in the first or second round. 28% of MLS Next Pro. Do you remember hearing a peep in 2022 about these sides getting upset and USL Championship being a dead league that nobody should play soccer for USLC anymore? And it is what it is. I don't. The idea that just because it has MLS in their name that you gotta dunk on it. And again, should they even be here at all? Probably not, right? And we've had that conversation. We're not defending their presence in here. And you're allowed to be happy that they are not winning, right? Which is fine. Like, I'm not saying don't be if you are an anti-MLS person and you see an MLS affiliate losing, you'll be happy about it, and that's fine. Like, I'm not saying you're not allowed to be happy about it, but give credit where credit is due. Don't use these losses as this is why MLS Next Pro should never exist. Give credit to the teams that are creating these upset, these amateur teams that are beating third division sides, right? Because here's the thing, right? El Farolito, right? The team that we were talking about. They beat, I believe it was Portland Timbers 2 in the first one. It was like, oh my God, look at that. MLS Next Pro, they're terrible. The next round, they go on and beat a USL 1 side in Central Valley. And it was like, oh my God, they've won again. And then crickets, right? And instead of going back in this clip and being like, hey, I want to leave you one final note, big shout out to El Farolito, the team from a burrito stand in California, making waves in the U.S. Open Cup, 2 back-to-back upsets, making it to the third round and playing against, I don't actually know who they've been drawn against yet. I have to look it up, but
it's Oakland.
Oh, playing against Oakland. Great. Awesome. They're going to get another chance at a USL championship side. They've climbed. They're playing everybody from how great is that? This is what the cup's about. And then going on and saying, hey, this is why we don't want, MLS to go out of it so we can have more of these. Totally fine. A very fair and accurate gripe or criticism, right? Those are the 2 words I'm looking for. Of the situation that is at hand, right? But to completely disregard those 2 or the 4 rather, excuse me, who have had all these upsets and have won against these other D3 teams just to take a shot at an MLS Next Pro side so that you can take an extended shot at MLS is lazy, right? There are ways you could have gone about that would have been better. And again, this would not have been as big of a deal for me if the entire episode was a US Open Cup episode. But for the fact that it was a 40-second right at the very end of the episode just to get engagement and viewers that sucked me in, got me. That is just, it's such a bad, it's just bad bad soccer reporting, but whatever.
I mean, if it was really about like the upsets, then Farolito is not the only team from NPSL that is currently still in the competition. So if it were about upsets, then you would cover all of the teams that have made runs this far. Like there's Lubbock Matadors, who also are in NPSL and also are in the third round right now, set to play against New Mexico United. Sure, they haven't come up against USL 1 and MLS Next Pro, so of course there's no conversation about them, but they beat a NISA team and they beat a UPSL team.
Right. And I don't know where NPSL, UPSL, I think they're all in this relative same division, right? Open qualifiers each year since 2019 in the first 2 rounds have won 6 games, 6 or 5 or 6 games, which is exactly what's happened here. The only difference is this time it was against somebody with the MLS in their name, and now it's a big deal, which is disappointing because it lessens the impact of those achievements. Those achievements are massive for those people, and instead of being talked about like they should be, everybody's focused on how MLS should be, dumped on. And I'm not saying you're not allowed to enjoy MLS teams losing, right? Like when MLS comes in the round of 16-ish, somewhere around there, if all of their teams lose, go nuts, have a great time, right? Because you guys have been very upset with the way that they've gone about it. Great. And again, there are 2 sides to this coin, right? Like it's adults beating teenagers, right? Like, we shouldn't get too hyped about that. But at the end of the day, these are kids who are hyped to be the next level. And apparently some of the MLS Next Pro teams even took the approach of what an MLS team would do and played the reserves of the MLS Next Pro team. Like, people were getting their first appearances in US Open Cup, so people were using that to drop down. At the end of the day, an upset's an upset, right? So as much as and we've said it a bunch here, now I'm kind of thinking back on it. As much as we want to say like, oh, they're teenagers and don't dunk on them because whatever, it's still an upset. It's an amateur team advancing in a tournament to play these kids or these other pro teams. Give them the credit they're due. All right. Yeah, that's me done, I think.
Yeah, I think you wrapped it up pretty well.
Yeah. Again, but and we could do an episode like this every week, right? Like this sort of commentary is an easy one for us to talk about because, as you mentioned, it's low hanging fruit. But we won't, and we'll just leave it here and move on from there. We'd love to know your thoughts, your comments. I'm sure a lot of people will jump in on that. So we hope you enjoy it. We hope you did enjoy it. And like I said, leave your thoughts and comments. Go ahead and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. So that's YouTube and then any podcast platforms, so that you can know when the live episodes get put up. And then follow us on social media. So Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. That's where we post all of our clips and try and engage with you guys. And we'd love to do that. So give us some follows on there. I've been Andrew. That's Connor up above me or to my left. I think you're on my right in these YouTube videos that I do. So he's over on my right now. And we really enjoyed having your ears to our words. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players, an MLS podcast. See ya.